Hey, I'm Alex Irving and I'm the director of linemark.com. Welcome to the Line Striping 101. So really the first question is going to be, why do you want to get involved in line striping or line marking? Well, for me, I was actually involved in landscaping before doing line marking. This was very much a bolt-on to my existing landscaping business. However, within around 6 months, this grew to 3 or 4 times bigger than my landscaping, and that's why it became my full-time business. So ultimately, one of the things you're probably going to be looking for is to make profit. I mean, who isn't? That's what we're here for. So in terms of whether or not it's a great investment and whether it's right for you, we typically operate a gross margin of around 80% and a net of around 25%. So in terms of whether or not it's a great investment, I think it's been absolutely the best investment we've ever made. But does that mean it's right for you? Well, depending on whereabouts you're based. So here in the UK, it is a relatively uncontested market space. Now, really, there are around 20 or so larger companies and a handful of smaller companies, maybe around 200 in total. But when I was doing landscaping, there were probably 200 companies just in the county that I live in. So by comparison, I'm competing with that on a national basis now. Now, while profit is probably one of the main drivers, as I mentioned, diversification, adding a service that you're not currently delivering to a customer base you already have. So if you're in the landscaping sort of markets and you've already got commercial customers, this is an ideal bolt-on. If you don't already have those sort of customers, because it's a relatively uncontested market space, this is very much a blue ocean and an opportunity for you to get involved in something where there's very little competition for the time being and be a part of a bigger brand. So for those of you interested in joining, or perhaps you have just joined our franchise group, you're going to be part of one of the biggest companies in the industry. For those of you that are setting out on your own, welcome to the industry. So we talked about the marketplace being relatively uncontested as well as being able to make a good profit. And as I mentioned, around 80% gross, 25% net, what that translates to is around £3,500 per day per 2-man team. So if we were doing a typical installation, we'd send 2 people out and we'd expect around £3,500 return on that with a 25% net profit. In terms of geographical scope as well, being based here in the UK as part of the franchise group, we're obviously got franchise partners now across the UK, and that's where you'll be joining into as well. However, if you are just setting out on your own, there isn't really a good area or a bad area. Everywhere you go to, you're going to have car parks, you're going to have factories and warehouses, and you're going to have lines along the road. I can't think of anywhere where you wouldn't see that. So I think great opportunity. Another one you may wish to consider is cross-selling opportunities. So if you're already in landscaping or a similar service, perhaps you're an electrician or you're in commercial maintenance. I was actually an electrician for around 15 years. The landscaping was a bolt-on to that, and then the line marking a bolt-on to the landscaping before it became my main business. But the opportunities to cross-sell are really endless. And if you're already in that commercial space, to add line marking on, it's a relatively low investment and it has huge, huge potential. So what does it actually cost to get involved in line marking? Well, I actually started out with this machine right here. This machine set me back, at the time when I bought it, it was around £10,000, I believe, all in for the electric one. I also got the Graco 5900, which set me back around £8,500. Now that was a relatively low investment for something that is literally capable of going out, and you can do car parks at £3,500 a day with these. Now the reason I got 2 was because I wanted one for yellow, one for white, to make it even quicker and not have to change over the colors. Now I would recommend that's something you consider, because you also get that slight tinge or taint of color every time you change it if you don't clean it absolutely perfectly. So I would always go for 2 machines. But as an investment, it's relatively low. Now we do also have the brand new Titan equipment as well. And again, these ones run into a little bit more money, as well as when we look at the grinding systems, the drive-on units that attach to them as well. It does start to add up, but as a very basic investment, if you're starting out, you could buy a single machine for, let's say, £10,000 or $10,000. We get you a really basic machine with a couple of spray tips. The other considerations you're going to have from there, of course, are transport. So you may need a trailer, you may need a van. You are also going to need some stencils and some hand molds, so depending on which products you're going to use. So for those in the franchise group, we'll also provide the stencils as well as all the paints. For those of you not as part of our franchise that are literally branching out on your own, you're going to need some good different sort of variety of products. So MMAs are great for hand mold systems, solvents and acrylics are great for the spray machines. Water-based is great if you want something more environmentally friendly. But you're going to need some stencils to spray on the ground and, of course, a good, reliable machine. Now, you can get away with just one, but I think 2 is really the minimum I would go for when it comes to line marking or line striping a parking lot or a car park. Now, when it comes to indoor line marking, totally different kettle of fish. For this one, you're going to be using a shot blasting system, typically set you back around $15,000 or 12.5 to 15,000 pounds. You may also need to add a generator to it as well as your shot blaster, again a trailer and all the cables that go with it, and then it's really just the sundry items like the tape and the rollers, etc. They may not sound like much, but they do add up. So as a typical investment, I would say if you're starting out on your own, if you had a budget of around 10,000 for your machinery, 2,000 or 3,000 for the sundries, and then your transport such as trailer or van to transport everything, that should probably get you going £12,500 or $14,000. When you're looking at internals, a little bit more money. You're probably going to need around £15,000, $17,000 for the very basic, smallest of machines. Now, if you're then going to be getting into grinding, which is something that I would recommend as well, because you need to grind walkways, typically if you're removing heavier paints, you could comfortably spend another 15 to 20,000. So for your indoor projects, you can start at around £15,000, but that's going to be the bare minimum. Again, with the externals, that 12,000 is going to be your absolute minimum starting. Now, this doesn't take into consideration drying. When it comes to drying the ground, or in fact, when it comes to painting the ground, it has to be completely dry. The easiest way to do this is using a turbine drying system, but of course you could use a propane powered one as well. Now, a turbine system will typically cost you around £10,000 or $12,000, whereas a propane system might cost you around 3 to 4. Now, while there is a big price difference, there is also a huge difference in output and quality. And I think turbine really is the only product I would use. I typically wouldn't go for gas powered and open flames. For one, I don't like the open flame. And number two, they're so much slower in comparison and so much, I don't know really, just less user friendly in comparison. So absolute minimum prices I think you'd need to invest to get started, £12,000. Ideally, you need a dryer on top, but if you're only painting really, really dry weather in the middle of the summer, you'll be absolutely fine. Any moisture on the ground whatsoever, you are going to need a dryer or your paint simply won't stick. For internal equipment, a minimum of £15,000, $17,000, and that should get you going. Again, absolute minimum investments, I would suggest.